Hey, good morning, class. Welcome in. All right, we are about to start a new unit. We're going to get going with the French Revolution and the Age of Napoleon. So, we have taken a look at the French Revolution documentary, which laid out essentially all of the horrific situations and how that escalated. We're going to take a look at that in depth. We're going to focus on 3 lectures on the French Revolution, then we're going to look at 2 that are going to focus on Napoleon. And we're going to have a really cool project that's going to be put in place, and I'm excited to get into that. So, without further ado, let's get into this first discussion on the French Revolution. So, understand this. In the 1700s, okay, France was considered the most advanced country in Europe. It had a large population and was prosperous for trade. It was the center of the Enlightenment movement, and France's culture was highly praised and often imitated by the rest of the world. So you have a lot of intellectuals, you have a lot of progressive thoughts coming into play here in France, and everything seems good. You have a royalty that is very wealthy. However, the appearance of success was deceiving. Okay, there was a great unrest in France due to bad harvests, high prices, high taxes, and there were disturbing questions raised by the Enlightenment ideas of Locke, Rousseau, and Voltaire. All these philosophers were starting to question how things should be, and they're really starting to question, levels of authority and what we can do as human beings, and that becomes a dangerous situation. So the older order in the 1770s, the social and political system of France, the old regime remained in place. All right, under this system, France was divided into 3 estates. Okay, so the first estate was essentially the Roman Catholic Church, the clergy, and this formed the first group and owned about 10% of the land in France, provided education and relief services to the poor. 2% of the income went to the government. The second estate, these were the wealthy nobles, all right, accounting for only 2% of the population. This group owned 20% of the land and paid no taxes. They lived lavish lives and rejected any new concept or idea being brought upon by the Enlightenment. Lastly, the third estate, about 97% of the people. 3 groups made up this estate. You had the bourgeoisie, who were the middle class, you had the French workers, and you had the peasants. This group was at a severe disadvantage against the first 2 estates. So if you look at that first picture on these slides, you see the third estate essentially being overrun by the first 2. Now let's talk about the third estate. Okay, the bourgeoisie comprised of bankers, factory workers, merchants, professionals, and skilled artisans. They were well educated and believed strongly in the Enlightenment ideals, especially equality and liberty. All right, this group paid high taxes and lacked privileges. This group felt that their wealth should essentially ascend them out of the third estate, that what they are doing, the living that they're creating for themselves, should escalate them into another area or another tier. The workers of France formed a second and poorest group within the third estate. All right, urban workers included tradespeople, apprentices, laborers, and domestic servants. This group was paid very low wages and often went hungry. Mobs would rise if the price of bread rose beyond their means, and that's what we are going to start seeing, is the price of bread is going to change drastically. Lastly, the peasants were the third group within the third estate. All right, they made up more than 80% of France's 26 million people. Peasants paid their income toward church taxes, noble taxes, and a king's tax. Peasants were incredibly frustrated with high taxes and a lack of privileges. So essentially, again, the third estate is downtrodden. They are poor. They are living in squalor, and they have had enough. Okay, but it doesn't help matters that there are some major economic troubles. So during the 1760s and 1770s, remember, France got into 2 costly wars, the French and Indian War and the American Revolutionary War. These wars took a toll on France's economy and would set them back for decades. What do wars do? They do 3 things, right? They kill people, they cost money, and they change everything. Well, the cost money aspect and the change everything aspect are going to be very difficult for France here. Once King Louis XVI took the throne, France was facing more hardships. The heavy burden of taxes made it almost impossible to conduct business profitably. All right, the cost of living was rising sharply, and bad harvests decimated France's agriculture. Couple this with bad weather, and you have a recipe for national disaster. So the merchants and the bankers of the Third Estate panicked. To make matters worse, King Louis XVI and his wife Marie Antoinette spent exorbitant, that's a ton of money, just ridiculous amounts of money on luxury items that included food, drink, clothing, furniture, and hunting vacation trips. So all this is occurring. We have multiple situations here where the Third Estate is being cast aside. They're having a hard time living. They're starving. They are not getting enough bread. And you have the richest of rich who are essentially living well beyond their means with no consequence. And there is a very big problem that is looming over France. And we're going to talk about escalation as things are going to really intensify in our next lecture. Okay? We're going to have a journal log that's going to be associated with this, and we'll start taking a look at our projects getting into research. All right. Thank you so much, folks. Thanks for checking in, and have a great day. Bye.